Hey guys, tonight we're going way back to a time when dinner wasn't just about picking between takeout or leftovers, it was about survival. Welcome to the Great Depression, when millions of Americans had to figure out how to feed themselves and their families with almost nothing. You're about to walk in those worn-out shoes, drag your heels down a dusty road, and stand in line for food that might not even be there when you reach the front. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this, but hey, that's the point of the journey. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1932. You're in the middle of the Great Depression, smack in the heart of it. The stock market crash is already a few years behind you, but things haven't bounced back. In fact, they've gotten worse. Factories are shuttered. Banks are folding. Your father lost his job. Your older brother went west looking for work and hasn't sent a letter in weeks. And here you are, stomach growling, staring at an empty pantry and a mother who's doing mental gymnastics trying to turn 2 potatoes and a heel of bread into a meal for 5. Dinner tonight isn't guaranteed. What is guaranteed? Hunger. Not that theatrical kind of hunger you complain about when lunch is a little late. This is the dull, dragging ache that turns into a headache, makes you dizzy, and adds just a bit more bite to everyone's voice. You and your siblings sit at the table, elbows close, eyes darting at the stove like you can will it to create something, but it doesn't. So you stand up, throw on a patched coat that's a size too small, and head down to the soup line with your mother. The line winds around the block, dozens of people deep. Everyone's quiet. There's no small talk when your insides are empty. The smell of boiling onions and whatever else they found to throw in hits your nose halfway down the block. It's not a good smell exactly, but it's warm, and that makes it almost comforting. You finally make it to the front, a chipped bowl thrust into your hands. The soup's thin, mostly broth, but there's a hint of carrot in there, maybe a rogue potato cube if you're lucky. You cradle the bowl like it's sacred, spooning it slowly into your mouth, dragging out the sensation of something. It might not be filling, but for a moment it dulls the ache. Here's your first historical fact of the night. By 1933, over 25% of the American workforce was unemployed. That's over 12 million people out of jobs, many without much savings. Soup kitchens, often run by churches or private charities, became lifelines. Some cities couldn't even fund them. Locals had to come together to scrape up donations. And while we romanticise these lines in hindsight, the truth was far from cosy. Standing in them was often humiliating. Now here's your quirky sidebar. In the early years of the Depression, some restaurants would purposely throw out day-old bread or slightly bruised produce right after dark. The timing wasn't a coincidence. They knew the hobos, the hungry and the desperate were watching from alleys or back fences waiting to pounce. It was an unspoken system, a kind of breadcrumb charity. No one admitted it, but it was real. And then there's the scholarly debate that never really dies. Did President Hoover do enough? You'll hear arguments on both sides. Some historians defend him, claiming his policies laid groundwork for later recovery. Others say his inaction, his belief that local charities, not federal programs, should handle the crisis, directly led to deeper suffering. People called the makeshift camps Hoovervilles for a reason. It wasn't affectionate. Back in your own world, night is falling. Your mother picks up a few scraps of onion skin someone dropped near the soup line and tucks them in her coat pocket like treasure. Tomorrow, they might flavour some boiling water. You don't ask questions anymore. At home, the radio crackles faintly. A voice talks about hope, about resilience. Your stomach rolls at the sound. Hope doesn't fill you up, but you still listen, because somehow, despite it all, you've made it through another day. You lie down that night with your clothes still on, partly to stay warmer, partly because there's no reason to change. Your bed is stiff, your body is stiffer. But your last thought before sleep wins is this: maybe tomorrow, there'll be more in the pot. Maybe tomorrow, someone will bring news from your brother. Maybe tomorrow, you'll taste real food again. You wake to the sound of a spoon scraping the bottom of a tin pot. That dull, rhythmic clink tells you all you need to know. Your mother is working magic again. Or trying to. There's not much in the house, hasn't been for weeks, but somehow she always manages to put something on the table. You roll off the mattress, still stiff from last night, and make your way to the kitchen. The air smells faintly of boiling starch and desperation. Breakfast this morning is a mystery until you sit down and see it. Stale bread soaked in hot water, sprinkled with a tiny pinch of salt. Soup toast, she calls it, like giving it a name might trick your body into thinking it's breakfast. You don't complain. Everyone's quiet as always. The younger kids slurp like it's good. Your father just stares at his bowl like it owes him something. You eat slowly, chewing each bite longer than necessary, trying to draw out the feeling of fullness. Making do isn't a choice anymore, it's an art form. Everyone has their own version. Some families mash boiled carrots into a paste and spread it like butter. Others grind old corn husks into something vaguely flour-like and fry it in leftover grease if they're lucky enough to have some. You once watched a neighbour cook dandelion greens she picked from a vacant lot and serve them with vinegar she'd made by letting apple scraps ferment in the sun. It smelled like sadness and tasted worse, but it was food. Today, you and your mother decide to try something new. Scavenging. Not dumpster diving exactly, because the trash bins behind the bakery are usually empty by morning. But you head out anyway, pulling a little handcart just in case. You stop by a few places, nothing. Then behind the butcher, you find a small pile of bones, mostly picked clean, but there's still some gristle clinging to them. Your mother picks them up like they're gold bars and wraps them in a cloth she keeps tucked into her coat. "Soup bones," she whispers, eyes shining like this is a miracle. Back home, she drops the bones into boiling water with a few bits of celery leaf she'd been drying near the window. You're on potato duty, just one, wrinkled and soft, but it'll stretch. She teaches you how to cube it small so it looks like more. "People eat with their eyes first," she says. You add it to the pot, stirring gently like you're crafting a potion instead of a poor man's stew. Here's your historical fact for today. Making do became a national motto during the Depression. Household guides, bulletins and women's magazines started printing recipes that didn't require meat, dairy or even sugar. Mock apple pie became popular. It used crackers, sugar and lemon juice to imitate the real thing. It's not good, but it exists. And existence in these times is half the battle. Now here's something strange. Some folks got really creative. One woman in Kentucky reportedly fed her family of 6 on a rotating diet of boiled weeds and fried squirrels for 3 years. She kept a diary noting how each squirrel tasted depending on what it had been eating. Her verdict? Acorn-fed squirrels were the best, and she hated the ones that lived near cornfields. Apparently they were stringy. And here's the debate. Was this level of self-reliance heroic, or did it mask the true failure of the government to act? Scholars argue over whether these resilient stories deserve applause, or if they just distracted from the systemic collapse that forced people into such extremes. It's a question you might ask yourself as you watch your mum pour hot water over 3 potato cubes and call it soup. By evening, the stew is done. It smells okay. Mostly watery, but the bone broth has given it just enough flavour to make you close your eyes and pretend it's real food. You sip it slowly, feeling it fill in the hollow parts of your stomach like plaster in a cracked wall. Later you lie on your side and think about what you ate. Not just today, but this week. You count it off in your head. Fried cornmeal 2 nights ago, boiled cabbage from the neighbour's garden on Monday, and something that might have been a rat stew if you're being honest. But no one asks questions. Your diet isn't a menu, it's a confession. Your younger brother, maybe 7, sits beside you holding a crayon stub like it's a pencil. He's drawing dinner on a scrap of brown paper, sketching sausages, a roast chicken, something that looks like cake. You don't say anything, you just let him. It's the only time you've seen him smile this week. The house is quiet again. No one bothers with the radio tonight. Electricity costs money, and there's no news anyone wants to hear anyway. You lie down fully clothed, blanket tucked up to your ears to trap the warmth. Your belly's not full, but it's not empty either. It's just quiet, like your body knows not to ask for more than it can get. Outside, the wind picks up. Somewhere, someone's burning garbage in a barrel, and the smoke curls through the street like a slow whisper. You close your eyes and try to dream of food that doesn't taste like boiled hope. You've barely opened your eyes before the wind starts rattling the loose pane of glass near your bed. It's got that dry, whispery howl that means something's coming, and it's not good. You pull the covers up to your chin, knowing full well they're not going to do much against what's heading your way. Out in the hallway, the floorboards creak under your mother's steps. She's already up, already moving, already bracing for what the day's about to bring. It's Dust Bowl weather, again. Breakfast is skipped. There's nothing to skip, really. Yesterday's soup is gone, and the bones have been boiled to the point of invisibility. Your mother mumbles something about checking the root cellar, but she's got that hollow look behind her eyes that means she's not expecting anything but disappointment. You step outside to help secure the windows. The sky isn't even blue. It's a sick, faded grey-brown, and the air feels thick and gritty, like someone's throwing sand in your face from a great height. Dust storms are like that. Quiet at first, and then suddenly everywhere. You tie a wet rag around your nose and mouth and help hammer blankets across the window frames. It won't stop the dust, not really, but it might slow it down. By mid-morning, the world outside turns dark as dusk. Dirt sifts in through every crack, every gap in the boards. It's in your teeth, your eyes, under your nails. You sit on the floor beside the stove, staring at your fingers, wondering when the last time you ate anything solid was. There's a small cloth bag of cornmeal left. Your mother pulls it down and sighs, long and low. Cornbread, she says, like it's both a punishment and a blessing. You help her mix it. Just cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt. No milk, no eggs. She bakes it in a cast iron pan over the stove, and the smell, dry and toasty, actually makes your stomach tighten. You eat it while it's hot, mostly because if you wait too long it'll harden into something resembling a brick. There's no butter, no honey, just grain and heat. You eat every crumb. It's not just food, it's armour against the ache. Here's your historical fact. During the Dust Bowl, entire farms were swallowed by dust storms. Families who had once grown wheat or corn were left with fields so dry and cracked you could lose a shoe down the fissures. Food that had once been grown in abundance had to be bought instead, except nobody had money. Families that had once prided themselves on self-sufficiency found themselves dependent on charity or handouts. Cornbread, even the most basic kind, became a symbol of survival. And then there's the bizarre twist. People would seal the edges of windows with strips of newspaper dipped in flour paste. Some even tacked wet rags over vents and keyholes. Nothing really worked. The dust still got in. One Kansas family reportedly buried their baby's crib in the ground each night, covering it with damp blankets to keep the dust out. The baby survived. The chickens didn't. Scholars still debate what made the Dust Bowl so devastating. Was it bad luck, an extreme drought cycle, or was it the result of poor land management? Farming practices that stripped the earth of its native grasses and left it vulnerable to erosion? Most agree it was both, but at the time no one cared about the cause. They just wanted it to stop. After lunch, or what passed for it, you help your father patch the roof with tar paper and flattened tin cans. The wind is relentless, and every now and then you see clouds of dirt spiralling on the horizon like brown tornadoes. Your mouth is so dry it feels like you've been chewing chalk. You look down and realise your fingernails are black with dust and grease. You don't bother washing up. Water's too precious. That night you dream of thick, buttery biscuits. They're warm in your hands, flaky and golden, steam curling off them like something from a cartoon. But even in your dream, there's a voice that whispers, "You don't have butter. You don't have flour. You don't have a dream." You wake up and wipe grit from your eyelids. The sky is still the wrong colour. The house smells like baked cornmeal and old wood smoke. Your father doesn't say much anymore. He spends hours staring at the old plough leaning against the shed, like he's waiting for the land to come back to life on its own. You've stopped asking questions. Everyone has. By the end of the week, you've eaten some form of cornmeal every single day. Cornmeal mush, cornbread, fried corn cakes. Your teeth ache from the grit. Your tongue is tired of the texture. You trade a toe for a slice of white bread. But there's no white bread. There's no bakery. There's barely even a town anymore. Just wind, dust, and people too stubborn or too stuck to leave. Still, when the wind calms for a few hours, you walk out into the silence. The sky is cleared just enough to show you a strip of blue. You dig your toe into the dry soil and imagine roots pushing down again someday. Maybe not today, maybe not soon, but someday. You hear it before you smell it. A faint bubbling sound from the pot, a soft plop of something thick shifting under steam. Then comes the smell, odd but somehow familiar. Tangy tomato, greasy sausage, and is that pasta? You step into the kitchen and there it is, simmering away like it belongs to a real dinner instead of a desperate experiment. Your mother stirs the pot slowly, like she's conjuring something more than just a meal. She looks up at you, eyes tired but proud. "Hoover Stew," she says. You say it back under your breath. The name hits weird. It's like calling it out makes it both a joke and an accusation. Name not in praise, but in bitterness. Hoover Stew, the stuff people cooked when they had nothing left but scraps and the memory of better meals. It's what happens when macaroni, canned tomatoes and cut-up hot dogs pretend to be comfort food. The pot looks okay. The pasta is soft, maybe overcooked. The hot dogs have curled at the edges, swimming in a soupy red broth that barely hides how little is actually in there. But it smells like food. Warm, savoury, real food. You grab a chipped bowl and your mother ladles it out, careful to divide things evenly. 1 hot dog chunk for you, 2 if she's feeling generous. Here's your historical fact. Hoover Stew became a staple in the early 30s, especially in relief kitchens and among families who could scrape together the ingredients. The base was always the same: macaroni, tomato juice or sauce, and some kind of meat. Usually cheap hot dogs or leftover bits of sausage. It was filling, it was hot, and it could be stretched to feed a large family for pennies. Now the weird bit. In some parts of the country people loved it. After the Depression, a few diners even kept it on the menu out of nostalgia. Some folks still serve versions today at state fairs and church suppers, proudly calling it heritage food. Imagine craving the taste of hard times. Then again, maybe it's not about the flavour, it's about remembering that you survived. And here's the scholarly argument of the night. Was naming things like Hoover Stew and Hoover blankets, aka newspapers used for warmth, a form of resistance? A political protest in the form of slang? Some historians think so. It was a way for everyday people to make sure blame had a name. Others argue it was just gallows humour. What else could they do but laugh? When the system fails you, sometimes all you have left is jokes and soup, and you eat your bowl slowly. The macaroni is mushy but kind of comforting, especially with a bit of salt. The hot dog's chewy, a little too salty, but it gives the dish its only real flavour. The tomato base coats everything like a weak apology. It's not bad, just not good. Still, it's warm, and right now warm is enough. Your younger sister licks her spoon clean and asks if there's more. There isn't, but your mother scrapes the bottom of the pot and gives her what's left. You don't say anything, even though your stomach still feels half empty. That's just how it goes. Later that afternoon, you walk past the old church where a volunteer hands out meal tickets for the city's relief kitchen. You stand in line again, but it moves faster this time. At the window, the woman behind the counter gives you a small sack of dry macaroni and a can of tomato paste. You blink, that's it. They're giving out ingredients now. It's not a meal, it's a dare. You carry it home like treasure. When you hand it over, your mother looks at the items and nods like she's solving a puzzle. 2 more hot dogs and we've got stew again, she mutters. Dinner that night is leftovers from the first pot, bulked out with a handful of boiled oats. Yeah, oats, you're not supposed to tell, but they thicken the stew and make it feel more like food. You spoon it into your mouth, trying not to think about breakfast because you're pretty sure there won't be one. And you're not alone. Down the road, the Jenkins family is doing the same thing. Mr. Jenkins swapped half a loaf of bread for a tin of Vienna sausages and made his own version. He calls it presidential pasta, with a half smile that makes you wonder if he's given up or just gotten really good at pretending. It's weird how quickly you start judging food by how much of it there is, not what it tastes like. A bowl of Hoover Stew is better than a slice of stale bread. 2 bowls? That's a feast. You find yourself dreaming of recipes. Not actual food, just the idea of it. Roast chicken with gravy, potatoes with butter, apple pie. You recite these like bedtime stories to your siblings, changing the details every night to keep the dream alive. Outside, the wind's died down. The dust has settled for now. You crack a window just a little and let in the cooler air. It smells faintly of dried leaves and chimney smoke. You sit on the stoop, watching the sky shift from amber to navy, bowl in hand, Hoover Stew steaming in the fading light. And for a second, just a second, it almost tastes like comfort. You wake up to the sound of someone coughing. It's your brother again, hacking his lungs out from the dust he swallowed yesterday, and maybe the day before that. You pull the threadbare blanket over your head, but it doesn't help. The morning is already creeping in, and so is the hunger. Again. You rub your eyes and drag yourself into the kitchen, already guessing what's for breakfast. Spoiler, it's beans. It's always beans. The pot's already on the stove. Your mother's stirring slowly, like if she moves too fast the whole thing might vanish. Inside, navy beans boiled until they collapse into mush, maybe with some salt if you're lucky, maybe with a shred of onion skin for the faintest illusion of flavour. She spoons a bit into each chipped bowl, one for each of you, and that's breakfast. And probably lunch too, maybe dinner. Depends on how fast everyone eats. You sit down at the table and stare into the bowl like it might blink first. It won't. You start to eat, and every bite is warm and bland and slightly gritty from the old pot. But it's food. It fills the corners of your stomach even if it doesn't light anything up in your brain. That first bowl is fine. The second one, later in the day, is tolerable. The third, that's when it turns into a mind game. You've had beans every day for 3 weeks straight. Pinto beans, black beans, kidney beans, even lentils when someone from church gave your family a bag. You didn't know there were so many kinds of beans until they became your entire food pyramid. Now you're something of an accidental expert. You can recognise them by shape, texture, soak time, and the exact moment when they'll start to burn at the bottom of the pan. Here's your historical fact of the night. During the Great Depression, beans were one of the cheapest, most available sources of protein. They could be bought dry, stored forever, and bulked up with water to feed whole families. The US government even recommended them in official relief cookbooks. One such recipe, Boston baked beans, which required molasses and pork, two things almost no one actually had. So people made Boston baked minus the pork, minus the molasses, and often minus the oven. Now for the odd bit, some people started getting creative out of sheer boredom. There were Depression-era cookbooks that offered up recipes like bean loaf, bean croquettes, and yes, bean fudge. That last one, equal parts terrifying and real. Someone somewhere decided to blend beans with cocoa powder and sugar in an effort to make dessert. It didn't work, but they wrote it down anyway. Bless their hopeful little heart. The ongoing debate here is about nutrition. Were these bean-heavy diets sustainable? Some historians argue that while beans offered protein, people still suffered long-term effects from malnutrition, especially due to the lack of fresh fruits, vegetables, and fats. Others claim that the beans helped stave off starvation and that people's ingenuity kept them afloat nutritionally better than expected. Either way, beans weren't glamorous. They were just what you had. You go outside after lunch, belly fullish, but not happy. Your friend Hank from 3 houses down is skipping rocks across a shallow puddle. He waves you over and offers you a bite of something wrapped in wax paper. You take it, hesitating. It's more beans, mashed between 2 slices of cornbread. You both laugh, because what else can you do? Later that day, your mother sends you out to the store with a few coins wrapped in a cloth. She tells you to look for dried beans or split peas, whatever's cheapest. At the general store, the shelves are a weird mix, some stuff completely gone, other things untouched. No one's buying spices anymore, sugar's expensive, flour's limited, but the bins of beans are still mostly full. You buy what you can carry and lug them back, feeling like a walking casserole. Dinner is, shockingly, also beans. This time your mother tries to spice it up by adding a spoonful of ketchup. It doesn't do much, but everyone pretends it's great. Your little sister claps when she sees the colours different. Your father mumbles something about it, almost tasting like real food. You all eat with an exaggerated sense of approval, even if it tastes like slightly sweeter sadness. You find yourself craving texture, not flavour, just something that doesn't feel like you're chewing wet cardboard. You dream about crunch, about crusts, about meat, even the tough kind. You remember a time when you hated your aunt's meatloaf. Now you'd trade your shoes for it. And then there's the gas. No one talks about it, but it's there. You're all living on beans and the house is not large. You've learned to sleep with the windows cracked, even in winter. You go to bed that night and your stomach isn't aching, which is more than some people can say. But your mind is. It's tired of monotony, tired of eating the same thing in slightly different shapes, tired of pretending that ketchup makes everything okay. Still, there's another bag of beans waiting in the pantry. And tomorrow there will be more boiling, more mashing, more chewing, more pretending. Because when you have nothing else, you have beans. You're out early the next morning before the sun fully rises, and your breath puffs out in little clouds as you walk along the empty dirt road. You've got a small burlap sack in one hand and nothing in the other, just in case you find something worth grabbing. Your stomach already started grumbling the minute you stepped outside, but there's no time to deal with that. The mission today is fruit, or anything even remotely like it. Down by the highway there's a roadside stand. Nothing fancy, just a few crates nailed together, and a faded hand-painted sign that says oranges, 3 for 5C. You don't have 5C, but you're hoping to talk the man down. Sometimes, if you look hungry enough, or if he's had a good morning, he'll toss you one for free. But today he just shakes his head and points to the sign. No handouts this week, he mutters, short on supply. You nod and keep walking, pretending not to feel the sting behind your eyes. That orange looked so bright, so heavy and full it practically glowed. It's not just fruit at this point. It's medicine. It's sugar and life and the memory of summer in your hand. But it's not yours, so you walk on. You head behind the stand, not to steal, at least not really, just to look. Sometimes they toss the spoiled ones out back and you're not above digging a little. You find one half-rotted orange in the dirt, skin soft and sunken on one side. You turn it in your hands, checking for bugs. The other side looks okay. You tear it open carefully, juice sticky on your fingers. You suck out the good part and leave the rest for the flies. Here's your historical fact. By the mid-1930s, access to fresh fruit in many areas, especially rural or Dust Bowl-stricken regions, was practically non-existent. Vitamin deficiencies like scurvy and rickets began to appear again, especially in children. Relief agencies tried to distribute canned fruit or powdered supplements, but the demand far outweighed the supply. An orange became a luxury. Apples, if not bruised beyond repair, were status symbols. Bananas were nearly mythical. You pass another child walking toward the same roadside stand. She's younger than you, probably no more than 6, carrying a coin in her fist like it's a crown jewel. You nod as you pass her, and she stares at the dried juice on your hands with a kind of longing that makes you feel both lucky and guilty. By noon you're back in town near the train tracks where the older boys hang out. They've got a kind of loose community down here, half hobo, half hustler. One of them, a lanky kid named Red, waves you over. He's sitting on a pile of crates with a tin can in his lap. Inside, peaches, canned peaches. You haven't seen canned peaches in months. He spears one with a pocket knife and chews slowly, clearly loving the attention. You trade? He asks, grinning. You show him the small coin your mother gave you, meant for beans tomorrow. He shrugs. 2 slices for the coin. You hesitate. That's dinner for your whole family. But it's also peaches. You hand over the coin. He forks out 2 slippery slices into a piece of torn wax paper. You eat them with your fingers, syrup dripping down your wrist, not caring how sticky you are. For 30 seconds, it's summer again. The taste is so sweet it makes your jaw ache. Here's the strange fact of the day. During the Depression, roadside fruit stands sometimes operated almost like pop-up banks. People would trade eggs, flour, even labour for a few pieces of fruit. In areas where orchards survived, fruit wasn't just food, it was currency. Some families lived on dried fruit they bartered for in bulk, soaking it in water to revive it for pies, stews, or even makeshift wine. Back home, your mother isn't thrilled that you spent the coin, but she doesn't yell. She just nods slowly, maybe remembering the taste of peaches herself. She pulls out a tin of apricots she's been saving for a holiday that never came and opens it right then and there. Might as well, she says. We're all starving for something that tastes like a memory. Everyone gets a spoonful and no one complains. The debate tonight? Some historians argue that these small moments, eating fruit, baking a cake with no sugar, stretching a can of peas, were actually more important to morale than government aid or speeches from Washington. They were symbols of normalcy, however small. Others push back, saying those moments only mattered because the system failed to deliver what people really needed. Food shouldn't be a miracle, they argue. It should be a guarantee. That night you sit on the back steps with juice-stained fingers, watching the stars start to peek out. The hunger hasn't gone away, it never really does, but your belly is quiet for now, and the memory of peaches lingers on your tongue like a half-forgotten song. Tomorrow, you'll go back to beans or bread crusts, maybe both. But today, just for a moment, you ate like it was summer. You're on your knees in the backyard, hands deep in dry earth, pulling weeds and praying that something edible still remembers how to grow. The dirt is stubborn, cracked from too many days without rain, but you keep going, digging with a broken spoon because the last trowel snapped 2 months ago. Your fingernails are caked with soil, your back already sore, and you haven't even hit the onion row yet. Welcome to your victory garden, except there's no victory here, and technically the war hasn't even started yet. Still, everyone's doing it. Front yards, backyards, window boxes, church plots. If there's sunlight and dirt, someone's planting something. You used to walk past houses with trimmed hedges and rose gardens. Now those same houses are lined with rows of cabbage, turnips, and if they're lucky, a few limp tomato plants. Even the banker's wife, who once turned her nose up at homegrown food, is out front in an apron, elbow deep in compost. Your garden isn't much to look at, but it's got potential. A few green shoots peek up through the soil, mustard greens maybe, or weeds. Hard to tell just yet. Your mum traded 2 jars of pickled beets for a handful of seeds from the pastor's wife. She wrote the names down carefully in pencil on a torn envelope. Carrots, spinach, radishes. But the rain got to the paper, and now they're all just smudges. So you plant everything and hope for the best. Here's your historical fact. Long before the iconic World War II victory gardens, Americans were already digging in during the Great Depression. The government and local charities encouraged families to grow their own food, distributing seed packets and offering pamphlets like backyard farming for the urban poor. These gardens weren't just hobbies, they were the difference between eating and not eating. It wasn't glamorous. Most people didn't have the tools, the know-how, or even decent soil. City folks ripped up sidewalks to make room for potatoes. Apartment dwellers grew lettuce in wooden boxes. Entire families measured their success not in dollars, but in inches of green stalks. You weren't just feeding your family. You were gambling with sunlight, rain, and faith. You walk the perimeter of your tiny garden and shoo away a neighbour's chicken who's eyeing your sprouts like a buffet. There's no fence, just some string and hope. Your little sister helps you water the plants with a tin can, collecting drips from a leaky spout and rationing them like you're fueling an airplane. Every drop matters, every sprout is precious. And now for the weird part, some people took their backyard farming a step too far. A family in Oklahoma reportedly raised rabbits in their cellar, 30 of them. They lived off rabbit meat for 2 years, tanning the hides for gloves and lining their shoes with the fur. Their house stank, sure, but they survived. Another woman claimed she grew potatoes under her bed using pots filled with shredded newspaper and a lamp. According to her journal, they were pale and strange-looking, but boiled up fine. The debate here is about dignity. Some say growing your own food restored a sense of control and pride during a time when so much had been taken. Others argue it was a band-aid over a bullet wound, a distraction from systemic poverty. One side celebrates resilience, the other sees a country abandoned to figure it out on its own, plot by plot, one cabbage leaf at a time. Back in your yard, the sun's starting to drop and you're planting onion sets, tiny bulbs that look more like marbles than vegetables. You bury them one by one, spacing them with your fingers the way your grandfather taught you before his hands got too shaky. You press the soil gently, then stand back, wiping your brow with a sleeve that's more whole than fabric. Dinner tonight is mashed turnips and fried dandelion greens from the alley behind the school. Your mum adds vinegar to make them taste like more. You chew slowly and imagine you're in a restaurant. You even try to pretend the old floral tablecloth is a linen napkin, folded just for you. Everyone's doing this now, imagining better things. It's free, and it works just long enough to get through the meal. You go to bed that night with dirt still under your fingernails. Your legs ache. Your stomach isn't full exactly, but it's not screaming either. That counts for something. You think about the green shoots in the backyard and wonder if they'll still be there tomorrow. Maybe the chicken will come back. Maybe the rain will forget to fall. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll wake up to a tiny miracle. And that's the thing about this garden. It's not just about the food, it's about having something that grows when everything else feels like it's dying. You fall asleep dreaming of tomatoes, heavy on the vine, red as sunburn, sweet as summer. You've never tasted one like that in real life, but dreams are still free. You're sitting on the porch with a scuffed-up basket in your lap, waiting for the neighbours' hens to lay. The sun is barely up, and already you can hear a few soft clucks from across the fence, those feathered freeloaders scratching around like they own the place. You're not stealing, this is a trade. Eggs for pickles, or technically pickled beet slices in an old jelly jar. It's not the most glamorous deal, but in this economy it might as well be a corporate merger. The woman who owns the hens, Mrs. Hanrahan, is out in her robe and boots, puffing on a cigarette like it's breakfast. She sees you and nods, disappearing into the coop for a minute before returning with a short stack of eggs in a tin pail. 3 today, she says, but they're small. You offer the jar, she eyes it, unscrews the lid, sniffs once and shrugs. Good enough? You feel like you just won the lottery. 3 eggs, real ones, with yolks. You thank her, cradling them like glass treasures in your basket, and start walking home, careful with every step. Here's your historical fact. During the Depression, eggs became a powerful currency in both rural and semi-urban areas. They were portable, easiest to store short-term, and essential in recipes that otherwise tasted like glue and shame. People used eggs to barter for flour, sugar, soap, even hand and haircuts. In some communities, you could get a doctor to make a house call if you brought him enough eggs. They were like edible gold. Back home, your mum nearly cries when she sees them. She holds each one up to the light, inspecting for cracks like a jeweller. Maybe we'll save one, she says. Boil the other 2. But your father is already lighting the stove. You all decide together. It's been a long week. You're eating them tonight. Dinner becomes an occasion. Your mother cracks the eggs into a cast-iron pan with a little grease she's been saving in a coffee can. They sizzle, the smell rising into every corner of the house, waking your brother, making your sister dance in a circle like it's her birthday. She sprinkles salt from a tiny folded wax paper packet, the kind that used to come free in a box of baking soda. The yolks are runny, bright orange, pooling around the whites like melted gold. Each person gets half an egg on a slice of stale toast. You eat slow, letting it drip onto your fingers, licking them clean. It's not much food, but it feels like a meal, like a proper one. You sit a little taller while you eat. For once, nobody is chewing in silence. Now for the odd fact. Some folks went beyond backyard hens. A few enterprising families raised pigeons, yes, pigeons, as a source of both eggs and meat. They called it city chicken, and while it wasn't glamorous, it got the job done. Others tried guinea hens, ducks, even quail, depending on what they could catch or afford. If it laid an egg, it was welcome. The scholarly argument tonight circles around whether the barter system, eggs for this, sugar for that, was sustainable, or just another form of survival that papered over the larger collapse. Some economists praise these small informal economies as brilliant examples of adaptability. Others argue it was a symptom of abandonment, proof that people were left to create parallel systems in the face of federal inaction. Your family, at least, has found a rhythm. You keep track of what's been traded, what might be again. Your mother keeps a little journal now, writing down who gave what for which thing. One neighbour brings onions, another has access to flour from her cousin's job at the mill. You trade your next jar of pickles for 2 bars of soap. You haven't smelled clean in a while, but that's about to change. The next week, Mrs. Hanrahan invites your family over for what she calls Sunday supper, which turns out to be scrambled eggs and fried potatoes. There's only enough for one helping each, but it still feels like a banquet. Her table is covered with a faded floral cloth and one wobbly candle in the centre. It drips wax into an empty beer bottle. You've never been more grateful for flickering light. You walk home under the stars with a full belly, clutching a cloth napkin that still smells like fried eggs. Your little sister hums a lullaby she swears she made up. Your mum smiles without faking it. Your dad carries your baby brother in his arms instead of over his shoulder. When you lie down that night, the pillow feels softer. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and something fried. You think about tomorrow and what might be on the table. Probably beans, maybe bread if someone's baking. But for tonight, there was egg. And in this world, that's everything. You're deep in the woods now, boots crunching over dried leaves and cracked twigs, eyes scanning the forest floor like you've suddenly become part animal. You didn't think this would be your life, crouched down in the brush foraging like a pioneer or a raccoon. But here you are. The plan is mushrooms, or maybe berries. Or, if the universe decides to be kind today, wild onions. Anything you don't have to pay for, anything that won't kill you, and anything that might taste like knock depression for 5 minutes. You've got a basket in one hand and a stick in the other, just in case you have to poke something. Your mother's voice echoes in your head. If you don't know what it is, don't eat it. Which frankly doesn't help much, since you don't know what 90% of what you're seeing is. You keep picking up plants and talking yourself out of it. That one's fuzzy, that one's purple, that one looks like it might bite back. The safe choice so far is nothing. Eventually you stumble across a patch of mushrooms that look like the ones your neighbour brought over last week. The edible kind, not the see God and die kind. You crouch down and gently pluck a few, checking the gills underneath, trying to remember all the rules someone once told you. No spots, no rings, no weird colours. You hope that's enough. You find some wild garlic too, growing under a bush like it knows it's precious. Into the basket it goes, wrapped in a napkin like treasure. Here's your historical fact. Foraging wasn't just a quirky survival method during the Depression, it was essential, especially in rural areas. Families scoured fields and forests for anything edible. Wild greens, nuts, berries, roots. Field guides were passed around like gospel, and local elders became rock stars for knowing which weeds could be boiled and which would end your week real fast. The weird fact, some families actually thrived on foraging. One woman in Appalachia reportedly fed her entire family for 3 years, almost exclusively on what she found in the woods. Her salad once included 12 different plants, from dandelion leaves to violet petals to something called lamb's quarters, which you can eat if you boil it long enough and ignore its name. She eventually published a pamphlet called Eat the Backyard, which still turns up in old flea markets. There's debate, of course. Some historians argue that foraging was a desperate last resort measure that romanticizes poverty. Others insist it represented a return to sustainable living and deep-rooted knowledge of the land. The truth, like most things, probably sits somewhere in the messy middle. It saved lives, sure, but it also meant you had to know what you were doing. One wrong mushroom, and that's your last supper. Emphasis on last. You keep walking further into the woods until the trees open up into a small clearing. That's where you spot him, Mr. Delaney from down the road. He's got a rifle slung over one shoulder and a squirrel hanging from the other hand. He waves, offers a dry smile, and asks if you're hunting or just window shopping. You shrug and show him your mushroom haul. He raises an eyebrow. Just make sure you boil those twice, he says, unless you want to fly out your ears. You trade him a bit of the wild garlic for a squirrel tail. Not because you want the tail, but because he insists it's good luck and you don't want to offend him. It dangles from your basket like a weird charm. Back home, your mother eyes the mushrooms with suspicion and a bit of hope. She cooks them down slowly with the garlic, then adds them to a watery broth she's had simmering with potato skins and leftover rice. You all watch as she stirs, like something magical is happening. And maybe it is. Dinner is mushroom soup, not great, not terrible. The mushrooms are rubbery but chewy in a good way, and the garlic gives it just enough flavour to pretend it's fancy. You chew carefully, still wondering if you're about to hallucinate a choir of goats, but the night passes quietly. Just steam and full bellies and no one clutching their stomach in agony. You count it as a win. The next day you go back out again. This time you bring your brother, who claims he saw wild carrots once near the train tracks. You never find the carrots, but you do spot some blackberry and trees that haven't been totally picked over. You eat half of them on the walk home and lie about it later, claiming the birds must have beat you to them. You keep foraging through summer and into early fall, learning more every week. Which plants sting, which ones cure headaches, which ones make you puke for a full day. Every time you bring something new home, it feels like you're hacking the system, beating the odds with roots and leaves. By late September, you've got a notebook where you sketch out plants and scribble notes beside them. Fuzzy leaves, good boiled, bitter raw. Purple berries smell sweet, taste sour, maybe bad. You're not exactly a botanist, but you're getting there. You go to bed with sore legs, hands scratched from thorny bushes, but your stomach? That feels better. That feels fed. Even if it was just mushrooms and garlic and a cup of broth, it came from the ground, and you found it. That changes things. Out your window, the moon is high and soft. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks and a train rumbles past. You curl into the blanket, feeling like part kid, part wild animal, part survivor. Tomorrow you'll go back into the woods, not because it's fun, but because it works. You're on a rooftop. Not your rooftop. This one belongs to an abandoned apartment building 2 streets over, where the stairs creak like ghosts and the pigeons sound like they're judging you. You had to climb up a broken fire escape just to get here. One shaky foot at a time, hands gripping rusted rails that left orange smudges on your skin. It's worth it though. Up here, the sun actually touches your skin. And more importantly, the chickens can't escape. Yes, chickens. There are 5 of them pacing in a makeshift coop made out of scrap wood and old screen doors. They're not yours, not officially. They belong to a woman named Miss Olive, who rents the 3rd floor and smells like lavender and peppermints. She keeps her birds up here, away from the street thieves and hungry neighbours, and in exchange for feeding and watering them, she lets you keep 1 egg a week. That's the deal. It's weird, but so is everything now. You crouch next to the coop, scattering a few handfuls of cornmeal mush you brought in a tin. The birds rush toward it like little dinosaurs, pecking and flapping, feathers flying. You smile. It's nice to feel needed. Miss Olive shows up a few minutes later with a chipped watering can and a cigarette tucked behind her ear. "They laid 2 this morning," she says, digging into her coat pocket. She hands you one egg. The other's mine. You tuck the egg into your shirt pocket like it's made of spun glass. It's still warm. For a moment, the city noise fades into the background, and the clucking and wind are all you hear. You look around and see something unexpected, green. Little planters on the next rooftop over, with kale and lettuce growing out of crates and old paint cans. Someone else is farming the skyline. Here's your historical fact. During the Depression, urban agriculture became not just a trend, but a quiet revolution. People grew food wherever they could. Vacant lots, rooftops, windowsills, alleys. Cities like New York and Chicago saw a rise in relief gardens, tiny personal farms maintained by the poor and working class. They weren't just about food, they were a rebellion against despair. And here's something bizarre. Some folks started raising goats in the basements of apartment buildings. Yep, full-sized goats, tied to posts next to coal bins or tucked in corners behind piles of newspapers. City authorities tried to crack down, but families argued the goats were quieter than the drunks upstairs and more useful than most tenants. Rumour has it one family in Detroit raised a pig in their bathtub. They named it Franklin. No one knows what happened to him, probably best not to ask. The debate among scholars. It centres on urban food access and resilience. Was this scrappy farming enough to keep people alive, or did it just delay hunger for a few lucky households? Some argue it highlighted how cities were never designed to feed their own people. Others say it was proof that even concrete jungles can grow life if there's people inside them are desperate or stubborn enough. After checking the coop one last time, you carefully descend the fire escape, one hand always gripping the railing. Back on the ground, you make your way through the alley behind the church, eyes peeled for dandelions. Not the flowers, the leaves. They grow wild here, popping up between bricks and broken bottles. You collect a small handful, brushing off the dirt, and stuff them into your sack. Your mum blanches the greens later in a pot of boiling water. The bitterness fades just enough to make them edible. She serves them with stale bread fried in lard, and your one egg, split in half, cooked sunny side up and slid across both plates. It's a strange little meal, half wild, half rescued, but it's warm and salty and tastes like you actually worked for it. That night you sketch out the rooftop coop on a scrap of paper, mapping where the birds sleep, where the water dish goes. You daydream about building your own someday, maybe when things get better, maybe when roofs don't leak and ladders aren't rusted and you don't have to trade chores for protein. You fall asleep with the wind rattling the loose glass in your bedroom window and the faint sound of someone whistling in the alley. The dandelion greens are still on your breath, sharp and earthy. The egg was gone too fast to savour, but your belly's not empty, and that counts for something. Tomorrow you'll be back on the roof feeding chickens and dodging pigeons. Maybe you'll ask Miss Olive about starting your own planter box. Maybe you'll collect rainwater in jars for the kale you haven't planted yet. Maybe this concrete world isn't all dead and grey after all. You're in the kitchen again, or what passes for one these days. A narrow space with cracked linoleum, a wood-burning stove, and a drawer full of mismatched utensils that all have some part missing. The window lets in just enough light to remind you how grimy everything looks. On the table sits tonight's culinary experiment. Water biscuits and something called a depression cake. You're already suspicious. Nothing good ever starts with, "So, we're out of everything." Your mother's sleeves are rolled up, flour dusting her forearms like chalk. She's mixing dough in a ceramic bowl with a fork bent at the neck. "This one doesn't need butter, milk, or eggs," she says, a little too brightly. "Just flour, water, salt, and a bit of lard." You nod and already bracing for disappointment. She rolls the dough out thin on a cutting board with a bottle that used to hold cough syrup. You notice her hands are shaking a little. Maybe from hunger, maybe from stress, probably both. The biscuits go into the oven like sacrificial offerings. They puff up slightly, but not enough to get your hopes up. You've had water biscuits before. Once they cool, they're barely one step up from cardboard. But they're warm and bland and fill space in your stomach, and that's what matters. You help her mix the cake next, which isn't really a cake at all. It's a sticky batter of flour, sugar, baking soda and vinegar. Yes, vinegar. Meant to mimic the richness of a real dessert without any of the ingredients that actually make it taste good. Here's your historical fact. Depression-era cakes, also known as wacky cakes or war cakes, were created out of pure necessity. Recipes had to make do without the staples. No butter, no eggs, no milk. Bakers used vinegar and baking soda to create lift, mashed beans or applesauce for moisture, and cocoa to mask the taste of desperation. These cakes were incredibly popular because they were cheap, easy, and surprisingly edible. The strange twist, some people actually liked these cakes. Even after things got better, the recipes stayed in family cookbooks. You'll still find them at potlucks in the Midwest, usually labelled Grandma's Crazy Cake or Eggless Wonder. Turns out nostalgia is stronger than flavour. The scholarly debate tonight circles around food memory, how the things we eat during hard times stick with us in ways that go beyond taste. Some researchers argue that Depression-era dishes became cultural artefacts, carried through generations as symbols of survival and thrift. Others suggest it's a kind of culinary trauma, people clinging to scarcity even when it's no longer necessary. Either way, these cakes have their place in history. Back in your kitchen, the cake's in the oven now, making the room smell like chocolate even though there's barely any in it. It's that fake-out kind of scent, rich but thin, like a perfume sample in a magazine. The biscuits come out hard and pale, edges slightly burned. You eat one carefully, chewing like your life depends on it. It tastes like warm drywall. You smile anyway. Dinner is a bowl of bean stew, again, served with 2 water biscuits and, for dessert, the cake. It's dense and chewy with a weird tang, but your sister claps when she tastes it. "It's sweet," she says, like that's a surprise. It kind of is. You'll laugh a little, maybe from relief, maybe from the sugar finally hitting your bloodstream after days of eating things with the consistency of paste. Later that night, your mother cuts what's left of the cake into thin squares and wraps them in wax paper for tomorrow's lunch. "School's better with cake," she says, slipping a square into each of your pockets. You nod. You've been trading parts of your lunch with other kids. Some have apples, some have canned sardines. One girl has pickled green beans from her aunt's cellar. But cake? That's top shelf. The next day, your lunch trade gets you half a hard-boiled egg and a slice of real white bread in exchange for your cake square. You eat the bread slowly, amazed by how soft it is, how it sticks to the roof of your mouth like it's made of clouds. The egg's cold and a little rubbery, but it tastes like protein and purpose. When you get home, your mother's trying another variation, this time adding leftover mashed potatoes to the cake batter. "Makes it moist," she says, and you don't question it. There's no room for picky eaters here. You help her stir and scrape the bowl, licking the spoon when no one's looking. It's weird how even bad cake batter still feels like a treat. The kitchen smells better now, cozier, like something lived in instead of just survived in. The walls are still cracked, the stove still smokes, but there's a little sweetness in the air, and that counts for a lot. That night you lie in bed with a full stomach, not bloated or heavy, just pleasantly satisfied. You didn't eat like royalty, but you didn't go to bed hungry either. And somewhere in your pocket, under your folded school paper, there's still a sliver of depression cake waiting for tomorrow. You don't even eat it tonight, you save it. Because even in times like this, it's nice to have something to look forward to. You're staring down at a slice of bread, and the only thing standing between you and its dry, scratchy misery is a smear of lard and 2 paper-thin rings of onion. You pick it up slowly, like it might fight back, and take a bite. The bread is stale, the lard is cold, and the onion punches you in the sinuses like a tiny angry ghost. But it's food. Technically. You chew with determination, swallowing past the lump in your throat, trying not to cry. Not because of the onions, but because this is dinner. Your little brother asks what it is. Your mum smiles, the kind of smile that's more muscle memory than emotion, and says, "A sandwich." You glance over at her, and she shrugs like she knows exactly how ridiculous it sounds. You nod and take another bite. You don't have to lie to each other. You all know this is just filler. Calories in disguise. Something to keep the hunger at bay for a little while longer. This lard and onion sandwich is one of those things that shouldn't exist and yet totally does. A slice of white, or usually greyish, bread ale, slathered with a thin coat of pork fat that's been scraped out of the bottom of a coffee can. A few shavings of raw onion to make it feel like a meal. Maybe a pinch of salt if it's a special night. It's not meant to impress anyone. It's meant to exist. Here's your historical fact. Lard sandwiches were a common go-to in the worst of the Depression years, especially in the Midwest and among coal mining families in Appalachia. Butter was a luxury, margarine hadn't yet become widely available, and cooking oil was reserved for actual cooking if you had any. But lard, if you butchered your own pigs or had connections to someone who did, was something you could stretch. Spread it on bread, toss on onions or salt or pickles if you had them, and that was your meal. And the strange detail, some people still eat them. Not because they have to, but because they grew up with them and somehow developed a taste. There's even a small cafe in Pennsylvania that serves coal miner sandwiches made of lard, raw onions and rye bread as a sort of novelty meets nostalgia dish. Tourists order them, take 2 bites and smile politely through watery eyes. The ongoing debate, particularly among food historians and sociologists, is whether these kinds of meals should be remembered fondly or pitied. Some argue that celebrating these recipes as heritage foods glorifies suffering. Others say these meals symbolize ingenuity, a kind of culinary endurance where families found a way to eat, even badly, through some of the hardest years in American history. Either way, the sandwiches are still around, and if you've ever tasted one, you'll never forget it. You finish your slice, drinking a glass of water to wash down the grease and onions. It sits heavy in your stomach, like a rock with opinions. You're not full exactly, but you're not empty either. There's something strangely comforting in that. Later that evening, your father comes home with a brown paper sack under his arm. He lays it on the table like it's made of gold. Inside, 2 sweet potatoes, slightly shriveled, and a small bag of dried cranberries he got through some kind of barter he won't explain. Man said his wife didn't like 'em, or he mumbles, as if trying to justify bringing home something so festive. Your mother immediately gets to work peeling the potatoes and slicing them thin, laying them out on a battered tin tray to roast over the wood stove. The smell starts to fill the kitchen, warm and earthy, a little caramelized. She sprinkles the dried cranberries onto top like she's decorating a cake. It's the kind of meal you didn't expect to feel excited about, but here you are, stomach grumbling, staring at the tray like it's a feast. Dinner that night is lard sandwiches again, second round, but this time with a side of roasted sweet potatoes and cranberries. It's weird, sweet and savoury at the same time, and it makes your mouth do that confused thing where it wants to say thank you and also ask, what is this? You eat every bite. Afterward, you and your siblings draw pictures at the table. Your little sister sketches a plate of spaghetti with meatballs the size of baseballs. You draw a hamburger, piled high with lettuce, tomato, cheese, things you barely remember tasting. Your mum tapes the drawings to the wall beside the pantry. So we don't forget what we're aiming for, she says. Before bed, you sneak into the kitchen and lick the inside of the sweet potato tray. It tastes like sugar and burnt crust. You don't care. It's the best thing you've had in weeks. That night, lying on your mattress with your arms folded behind your head, you whisper to your brother in the dark. Someday, you say, I'm going to eat so much food I'll be sick. He laughs, soft and tired. Me too, he says, but not onions. Especially not onions, you whisper, and you both drift off, dreaming of sandwiches with actual meat, and food that doesn't make you cry just by existing. You don't even remember a time when your hands weren't dusted with cornmeal. It's in your fingernails, ground into the cracks of the wooden table, and somehow always in your socks. You're starting to think if someone shook you hard enough, a tiny loaf of cornbread would fall out. Breakfast, cornmeal mush. Lunch, corn fritters if you're lucky. Dinner, a dense square of dry cornbread next to a bowl of bean soup, so watery it basically counts as broth. Your life is cornmeal, your dreams are yellow and gritty. This morning's meal is no exception. Your mother's at the round stove pouring a slow stream of cornmeal into boiling water while stirring like her life depends on it. She calls it mush, yes, but that feels generous. It's closer to paste, thick, unflavoured, and threatening to set like concrete if you don't eat it fast. She spoons a mound into each bowl and passes them out like rations. There's no sugar, no milk, no anything, just heat and texture. You eat slowly, trying not to let the spoon clank too loudly. Your brother is already halfway through his and licking the bowl like it owed him money. You can't blame him. At least it's warm. Here's your historical fact. During the Great Depression, cornmeal became a survival staple for millions of American families, especially in the South and rural Midwest. It was cheap, shelf-stable, and versatile, at least in theory. Government relief often distributed bags of cornmeal by the ton, alongside flour and powdered milk. Recipes were published in newspapers and mailed out in federal newsletters. Cornbread, Johnny cakes, hush puppies mush, hoe cakes, cornmeal pudding. If you could imagine it, someone tried to make it with cornmeal. And the quirky bit, People got too creative. One infamous dish involved cornmeal moulded into a loaf with mashed turnips, fried onions, and bacon grease when available, then sliced and pan-fried until crispy. Some called it poor man's terrine, others called it Tuesday. A travelling salesman once offered cooking lessons using nothing but cornmeal and ketchup. He didn't make much money, but he sure got people talking. The scholarly debate. Some food historians argue that the overuse of cornmeal contributed to nutritional deficiencies, particularly in children. Niacin deficiency, also known as pellagra, was rampant in areas where cornmeal made up the bulk of the diet without the niacin-releasing process, nixtamalization, traditionally used by indigenous cultures. Others suggest it was a lifeline, preventing mass starvation in entire regions. Maybe it was both, salvation and slow harm, all in one yellow scoop. You leave the house later in the morning with a cornmeal fritter wrapped in wax paper in your coat pocket. It's cooled into a tough, greasy disc, but it's the only thing standing between you and lunchless hunger. At school, you sit on the steps and eat it slowly, watching a few kids across the yard eat sandwiches with real fillings. Jam, bologna, even peanut butter. You'd give anything for peanut butter. One kid has a thermos. A thermos! You can't even imagine what it's like to drink something hot from a shiny container that keeps its heat. The fritter sticks to the roof of your mouth. You wash it down with a sip of water from the school's pump, which tastes like rust and cold metal. You pretend it's lemonade. Back home, your mother's trying something new for dinner. Cornmeal pancakes, she says, as if it's a breakthrough. They're thinner than cornbread and fried in leftover lard, with edges that curl like leaves. No syrup, of course. You spread a little applesauce across yours, rationed from a jar that's now mostly memories, and fold it like a taco. It crunches weirdly when you bite into it, but you keep chewing. Later, your father comes home with a sack of something over his shoulder. You all gather around like it's Christmas morning, and he pulls out, drumroll, more cornmeal. This time in a brown paper sack with Grade C, government surplus, stamped in faded ink across the top. Your mother doesn't even blink. She just starts planning. Tomorrow's menu: cornmeal biscuits, cornmeal gravy, and maybe, just maybe, a cornmeal pie crust filled with mashed beans. Mock shepherd's pie, she calls it. You smile because you can't cry anymore. You've sweated out your tears with every scoop of mush and every stale slice of cornbread. You go to bed that night belly fullish again, but not satisfied. Cornmeal has become so familiar it doesn't even register as food anymore. It's just a routine. It doesn't comfort you. It doesn't surprise you. It just is. You close your eyes and dream of butter melting into fluffy white bread, of syrup running down a stack of real pancakes, of biscuits that flake instead of crumble. And in that dream, no one says cornmeal even once. The can is heavy in your hand, heavier than it should be considering it's filled with something labelled processed cheese product, government issue. You shake it and it doesn't move, just a low gelatinous thump, like the cheese inside has made peace with being stuck forever. Your mum stares at it on the counter like it's a guest and no one invited, but now has to feed anyway. After a second, she grabs the opener, braces the can and starts twisting. The smell hits first, sharp, salty with a hint of metal and sadness. The cheese slides out with a wet shpah, landing on a chipped plate with the grace of a brick. It glistens slightly under the kitchen light, firm but somehow squishy, like if a sponge got an artificial flavouring degree. You all just stand there for a second staring at it. Then your mum slices it into thick slabs and places them carefully between slices of dry bread. "Grilled?" she asks. You nod. Always grilled. If you're going to eat a block of waxy mystery cheese, at least warm it up first and pretend it's a delicacy. She slaps the sandwiches onto a hot pan greased with lard, the sizzle bringing a little life into the room. You watch as the cheese softens slightly. Not melts exactly, but more like slumps under pressure. The smell gets richer, and your stomach growls in anticipation. When she flips the sandwiches, the bread is golden, edges crisp. It smells like school cafeteria Fridays used to smell, back when there were school lunches that included actual milk cartons and orange slices. Here's your historical fact. Government cheese became a real staple during the late Depression and into the 80s, with massive federal surplus programs created to stabilise the dairy market. The cheese, usually American or some processed blend, was distributed to low-income families through relief programs. In the 30s, it was often delivered in nondescript tins or wrapped blocks, given out at food banks, schools and community centres. It wasn't great, but it was protein, and it kept people fed. Now the odd detail, this cheese had a literal cult following. Some people swore it made the best grilled cheese sandwiches of their lives. It was salty, shelf-stable and nearly indestructible. Cheese you could leave out on the counter for 2 days and still slice with confidence. Decades later it developed a kind of nostalgic fame, with some foodies and chefs trying to recreate its exact texture and melt. A few even insisted it was superior to store-bought cheddar for mac and cheese. That may or may not have been a cry for help. And the scholarly debate? It hinges on dignity. Was this processed cheese and other canned goods a kind of lifeline for people who truly had nothing, or a symbol of how low the safety net had sunk? Historians look at it both ways, a necessary evil born of surplus and economic collapse, and a sign that the poorest were expected to accept anything, no matter how artificial or unappealing, so long as it had calories. As one writer put it fed us, but it never felt like food. Still, you eat your sandwich like it's gourmet. The bread is crispy, the cheese soft enough to stretch a little when you pull it apart. It's salty and rich, sticks to the roof of your mouth, and honestly, it's pretty good. You don't care if it's processed. You care that it's filling. Later, your mother opens another can from the relief box. Canned spinach. It smells like seawater and sadness. She heats it with garlic and a splash of vinegar, and serves it next to leftover mashed potatoes. You drown yours in more of the cheese, melted into a thick, shiny puddle. There's no butter, no cream, but you tell yourself it's a sauce. The texture is half glue, half dream. After dinner you help wash dishes in lukewarm water with a sliver of soap that keeps disappearing into the sponge. You dry your hands on your pants because the towels are all crusty from air drying in a house with no heat. You sneak back to the fridge and peek inside, just one shelf, one bulb flickering overhead. Half a can of cheese sits on a saucer wrapped in wax paper. You consider licking it. You don't, but you do smell it. It smells like survival and plastic and kind of like victory. That night you lie in bed with a stomach that feels heavier than usual. Not bloated, just satisfied. Cheese does that, even the fake kind. You close your eyes and imagine more meals with it. Cheesy potatoes, macaroni and cheese and crackers. You haven't had a cracker in years, but your imagination can fill in the crunch. Tomorrow's breakfast might just be toast with a slice of this glorious weird cheese melted on top. You'll call it breakfast au gratin and pretend you're in a French bistro instead of a broken down house with frost on the inside of the windows. You've gotten good at pretending, and really, as long as you have one more can of cheese, you've got just enough hope to make it another day. The line wraps around the corner, silent and slow-moving, like a funeral procession with spoons. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, trying to ignore the cold that's crept up through the soles of your shoes. The wind cuts between the buildings like a blade, sharp and wet with the promise of snow. You can't feel your toes anymore, but you don't step out of line, not after waiting this long. The people ahead of you look like statues bundled in coats that haven't seen a needle or thread in years, each of them holding a bowl, a mug, or a chipped cup. Anything to catch a ladle's worth of something warm. This is the soup kitchen line, your new dinner table. No reservations required, just patience, humility, and a stomach you can hear louder than your own thoughts. You glance back and see the lines doubled since you arrived. Some folks stand with kids pressed close to their sides. Others are alone, heads down, scarves wrapped up to their eyes. No one talks, no one complains. There's no point. Eventually you get to the front. The smell hits first. Onions, maybe carrots, definitely something boiled within an inch of its life. A volunteer, face pink from the cold and hair tucked under a knitted cap, ladles soup into your tin mug. You thank her, barely a whisper, then step aside to the row of crates and folding chairs arranged under a sagging awning. You sit, you eat, and for a few minutes you feel human. The soup is thin, mostly broth, but there are chunks of potato and one glorious sliver of meat that you catch on your spoon, like it's a prize fish. It tastes like salt and fatigue, and you wish it were twice as much. But it's something. It warms your hands as you hold the mug. It warms your insides as it goes down. It does what it came to do. Here's your historical fact. Soup kitchens became a defining feature of the Great Depression. They sprang up in churches, basements, converted storefronts, and even alleyways. Run mostly by charities, religious organisations, and eventually municipal governments, these kitchens served millions of meals to the jobless, the homeless, and the hungry. In cities like Chicago, soup kitchens were often the only thing standing between families and starvation. And the strange truth, Al Capone, yes, that Al Capone, famously opened one of the first soup kitchens in Chicago during the Depression. His operation fed over 2,000 people a day. Some say it was a PR stunt, others believe it was genuine charity. Either way, people lined up and they got fed. History doesn't always come with clean answers. The scholarly debate centres around whether soup kitchens truly addressed the root of the crisis or simply eased the symptoms. Some historians argue that they provided a vital safety net when the government failed. Others suggest they were a form of societal anaesthesia, keeping unrest at bay by offering a spoonful of mercy. The soup didn't fix the system, they say. It just dulled the edge of hunger long enough to keep people quiet. You finish your soup and hold the empty mug to your lips, catching the last traces of salt and steam. Across the row, a kid slurps loudly from his bowl, grinning like he just ate Thanksgiving dinner. You give him a little nod. He gives you one back, eyes bright under a too small cap. It's one of the only smiles you've seen all day. When you return home, your mum's waiting with a cup of hot water and a crust of bread she toasted over the stove. She asks how the soup was. You say it was warm. That's all she needs to know. That night she tells a story about a family down the block that made their own soup kitchen out of a porch and a pot. They called it neighbour stew. Everyone who came had to bring something, a carrot, a potato, a handful of rice. The pot never stopped simmering. It wasn't perfect, but no one left empty-handed. You think about starting your own version. Maybe not right away, but someday. A pot on a fire, bowls handed out one by one, and no questions asked. You imagine adding garlic, thyme, even a bay leaf. You've never actually seen a bay leaf, but you've read about them. You bet they smell amazing. You fall asleep that night fullish, your belly not exactly satisfied, but at least not aching. Your dreams are strange and soft, spoons clinking on metal, a line of people stretching through clouds, all waiting for soup that never runs out. When you wake up, your mug is on the bedside table, empty but still a little warm from your hand. Tomorrow you'll line up again. Maybe they'll have beans in the soup, maybe noodles, maybe it'll be just broth. Doesn't matter. You'll stand there like everyone else, holding your bowl like a prayer. Because in this world, soup means you made it through another day. The kitchen table is cleared, and in its place sits an odd assortment of treasures. A can of peaches, 2 small onions, a half loaf of dense, slightly green bread, and a dented tin of sardines. No one's eating yet. These aren't dinner ingredients, they're trade goods. Your mother's got her elbows on the table, eyes narrowed like she's playing poker. Your father's rubbing his chin, deep in thought over how many servings those peaches are worth and whether sardines have gone up in value since last week. Welcome to the neighbourhood underground market, held not in some hidden alley, but right here, inside your own home. Barter is the language of survival now. It doesn't matter how much something originally cost or only what someone is willing to trade for it today. Money's mostly worthless in this little network of handshakes and whispers. What matters is what people want. And right now, the McGrath family down the street has sugar. Your family hasn't had sugar in a month, not even a spoonful. So your mum sends you to the McGraths with the can of peaches wrapped in a dish towel like it's something sacred. You're told to offer it straight up, 1 for 1 for a jar of sugar, maybe even 2. Don't let them talk you down, she says, and you nod, clutching the tin like it might disappear if you blink. Mrs. McGrath answers the door, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You hold out the can with both hands, polite, quiet. She squints at it, turns it over once, then calls into the house. A moment later she returns with a mason jar filled with coarse, tan sugar. It's not white, but it's sweet. Half a jar, she says. Final offer. You start to argue, then think better of it. You nod, hand over the peaches, and leave with the sugar jar tucked under your arm like a newborn. Back home, your mother sighs, but accepts the deal. It'll do, she mutters. She pours a little into a teacup for measuring, stashing the rest behind the flour tin like it's stolen treasure. Later, she boils water with a few apple peels and adds a spoonful of sugar. The result, apple peel tea, lightly sweetened. She serves it in mismatched mugs, and for a few minutes everyone drinks like royalty. Here's your historical fact. During the Great Depression, barter economies flourished in neighbourhoods, small towns, and even city slums. People traded goods and services directly, no money needed. Eggs for soap, bread for firewood, a repaired pair of shoes in exchange for a haircut. Barter networks became so robust in some communities that they operated like full-fledged marketplaces. Even local newspapers ran barter classifieds. And now, the fringe fact. In some places, people developed their own currencies. Scripts, IOUs, or community notes. One Michigan town printed wooden coins to be used only in local shops. In a county in Oregon, you could pay your electric bill with chickens. No, really. One utility company actually accepted them as payment for a few months. Their customer ledger read like a barnyard inventory. The academic debate is whether this barter culture was a healthy coping mechanism or a sign of collapse. Some economists see it as a beautiful example of people taking care of each other when institutions failed. Others argue it was a grim patch on a system so broken people had to invent entirely new ways to survive. Either way, it got people through. Later that evening, your dad comes home with a new prize. A single box of matches traded from a man who needed help chopping wood. Your father's blisters proved the exchange was earned. Your mum immediately uses one match to light the stove. The flicker feels like magic. Dinner tonight is onion stew again, bulked out with stale bread croutons toasted in the pan and crumbled on top. Not much, but with that sugar in the tea and the fire warm, the room feels more alive. After dinner, your sister shows off a button she got from her friend at school. Shiny red one traded for 2 pencils. She's planning to sew it onto her coat. Just one button, but it feels like style. You watch your mum make a new trade list for tomorrow. 1 sewing job in exchange for a pound of flour, 6 eggs for firewood, and maybe, if the rumours are true, someone has cocoa powder up on Maple Street. She circles that one, underlines it twice. "We're getting that cocoa," she says. "It's not a wish, it's a mission." You go to bed with a full stomach and your head spinning with negotiations. You dream of a street full of stalls, like a marketplace from another time, tents draped in patchwork cloth, people holding up jars, candles, homemade shoes, pickled beets and bundles of dried herbs. No cash registers, no price tags, just hands reaching out, offering and accepting. In the morning you'll be back out there trading scraps and stories. And maybe, just maybe, that cocoa will find its way to your kitchen. Dinner's on the table and no one's talking. That's your first clue that things are a little off tonight. The second clue is what's on your plate. A thick, greyish-brown slab that looks like meatloaf. Sort of smells like meatloaf, but absolutely does not behave like meatloaf when you cut into it. It squishes, not crumbles, not slices, just squishes. Your fork sinks into it like it's made of oatmeal and mystery. You look up at your mother, who avoids your gaze entirely, fussing with her napkin like it's going to fold itself into a turkey. "It's meatloaf," she says, not convincingly. You know it's not really meatloaf. You know she knows it's not really meatloaf. Everyone at the table knows. But no one says a word, because the thing is, it could be. It's not, but it could. And tonight, pretending is part of the meal. You take a bite. It's warm and soft, with a faint meaty flavour that vanishes about 2 chews in. There's something gritty in there, something chewy, and something that makes you suspicious it was once a bean, or a mushroom, or bread crust soaked in broth and mashed until they gave up their identity. Whatever this is, it has ideas about meatloaf. Lofty ambitions, but it's a cover band, not the real thing. Here's your historical fact. Meatloaf, in the traditional sense, was a pre-Depression dish designed to stretch ground beef using breadcrumbs and eggs. But during the Depression, it evolved or devolved into something else entirely. Real meat was expensive and rare, so cooks used oatmeal, cornmeal, stale bread, rice, mashed beans, or even grated vegetables to bulk it out. Sometimes there was no actual meat at all, just drippings or scraps for flavour. And the quirky twist? Some Depression-era cookbooks included mock meatloaf recipes that used peanut butter as the base protein. Yes, peanut butter. Mixed with chopped onions, seasonings, and whatever you had to trick the eye into seeing meat where none existed. Some swore by it. Others swore at it. Either way, it filled the pan and made the house smell like dinner. The ongoing debate in culinary circles is whether these mock foods were strokes of genius or trauma wrapped in gravy. Some see them as the proud product of kitchen alchemy, turning scraps into something nourishing and dignified. Others believe it distorted generations of food expectations, turning mealtime into a minefield of substitution, where nothing ever tasted like what it was supposed to be. Tonight's loaf is served with ketchup on top, because ketchup makes everything feel more real. It adds colour, a bit of zing, and covers the faint metallic aftertaste of canned tomatoes. Your mum drizzles it carefully, then spreads it out with a butter knife like she's icing a cake. You can almost appreciate the artistry. Next to the loaf is a scoop of mashed potatoes. Real ones this time, not powdered. They're lumpy, flecked with black pepper, and you don't care that the butter on top is actually just lard with a little salt. You dig into them like they owe you something. After dinner, your dad pats his belly and sighs contentedly, even if his plate is as spotless as yours. "That hit the spot," he says. You all nod, because what else can you say? In this house, eating something is enough to declare a win. What it was, not as important. Later that evening, you catch your mum scraping the last bits of the loaf into a container to save for tomorrow. She adds a spoonful of oats, a splash of milk, and mutters, "Stretch it a little." She's always stretching things. Food, money, patience. The woman could make a thimbleful of soup last 3 days. You volunteer to help her clean up. As you're wiping down the counter, you spot the little tin marked bouillon. It's nearly empty. Just one dusty cube left. The secret weapon, she calls it. "Makes anything taste like meat," she once said, laughing. Now you understand it's not a joke. Before bed, your younger sister draws a picture of dinner. A cartoonish meatloaf with steam lines, ketchup hearts floating above it, and smiling faces all around the table. It's not what it looked like, but maybe it's what it felt like, and that counts for something. You lie awake that night with your hands folded on your stomach, still tasting the faint tang of ketchup and oats. It wasn't meat, but it was warm. It stayed down. It brought everyone to the table. And for now, that's what meatloaf means. You drift off to sleep dreaming of real ground beef, juicy, tender, seasoned with garlic and onions. You imagine biting into a slice that doesn't squish but crumbles, edges crispy, center rich. Maybe someday, maybe next month, maybe next life, but tomorrow, it's leftovers. You're sitting on a wooden bench outside the school cafeteria, holding a dented tin lunch pail in your lap, and wondering what today's ration is going to be. You already know the answer, but you still hope for something surprising, something that doesn't come from a can or look like it's been portioned with a ruler. All around you, other kids fidget with their own pails and paper-wrapped parcels, trading quiet glances and louder stomach growls. The school lunch line isn't glamorous, but for a lot of kids here, it's the best meal they'll see all day. And some days, the only one. The bell rings and the line starts moving. You shuffle forward, trying not to think about your shoes. One of them has a hole near the toe that lets in wind, and you fix your eyes on the swinging double doors ahead. Inside, the cafeteria smells like boiled vegetables and warm milk, with a faint undertone of old mop water. Not exactly 5-star dining, but it's food, and that's enough. When you get to the counter, a woman in a floral apron and hairnet slides a tray toward you. On it, a scoop of macaroni that's more glue than pasta, a square of apple that's been sliced so thin it's nearly translucent, and, glory of glories, a half pint of milk. Real milk. Cold. In a little glass bottle with a paper cap. You peel it open like it's a wrapped gift, and take a long sip. It's creamy and slightly sour, but it's real. Here's your historical fact. During the Great Depression, school lunch programs were among the earliest forms of government food aid, funded in part by the Works Progress Administration, WPA. These programs were designed to feed undernourished children, while also employing thousands of women as cafeteria workers and cooks. For many families, sending kids to school wasn't just about education. It was about making sure they ate. And here's your quirky fact. Powdered milk, which became popular in later years, was first introduced as a school staple in rural areas during the Depression. It was rehydrated in giant metal vats and served lukewarm, often tasting vaguely of cardboard and regret. Kids complained, sure, but they drank it anyway. Some schools tried to hide the taste by adding vanilla, cinnamon, or even melted peppermints. The success rate? Mixed. The scholarly debate around school lunches touches on the same themes you live every day. Survival versus dignity. Were these lunches nutritious enough? Were they equitable? Some scholars argue they played a critical role in keeping children healthy and in school. Others point out that the meals varied wildly depending on the region, with urban schools often having better resources than rural ones. And then there's the pride issue. Many parents resisted the program at first, seeing it as charity, as a label of poverty pinned on their kids' coats. You don't care much about any of that right now. You're halfway through your macaroni, chewing slowly, trying not to notice that it tastes like it was cooked 3 days ago and revived with steam. It sticks to your spoon in one clump. You eat it anyway. Across the table, a kid with a green coat and wild hair offers to trade his apple slice for your macaroni. You shake your head. You're not proud, just hungry. After lunch, you save your empty milk bottle. The school lets you rinse it out and take it home sometimes. Your mum uses them to store spices or drippings, or to make tiny vases for wildflowers. She's been known to trade 1 or 2 for sewing thread or buttons. Everything's currency now. That night at home, you tell your family what you ate. Your little sister claps her hands when you mention the milk. Was it cold, she asks. Did it smell like cows? You laugh and say yes, even though it didn't. You promise to ask the lunch lady for an extra bottle tomorrow, not to drink, but to bring home. It's the little victories that keep the house from collapsing under the weight of constant hunger. Your father listens in silence, chewing on a crust of bread, and finally mutters, "Well, at least someone got fed today." Your mother doesn't say anything. She's watching the pot on the stove where tomorrow's breakfast, cornmeal mush of course, is bubbling slowly. She adds a pinch of salt like it's a magic trick. You go to bed that night with the ghost of warm milk still on your tongue and a weird sense of gratitude. You didn't get full, not exactly, but you got something. And you got it without your parents having to scrape the back of the pantry or trade another jar of jam for a few eggs. That alone makes it a good day. In your dreams, the cafeteria becomes a buffet. Rows and rows of trays piled with fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans dripping with butter, and mountains of chocolate pudding. You wake up halfway through your third helping, mouth open, stomach groaning. For a second, you're not sure what's real. Then you see the empty milk bottle on the table next to your bed, washed and gleaming in the moonlight. That's real. And tomorrow it might be worth something. The tracks stretch out in front of you like a metal road to nowhere. 2 narrow rails running side by side through weeds and dust. You walk with your hands stuffed into your coat pockets, one eye on the horizon and the other on the ground, scanning for nails, loose wire, maybe even a dropped coin if luck's feeling generous. You're not technically supposed to be here. These aren't the kind of places kids are encouraged to explore, but the rules got blurry a while ago, and you've learnt that sometimes the best recipes come with a little danger. Beside you, there's a boy named Virgil. He's older, maybe 17, with a face that looks like it's been weathered by more than just the sun. He's what folks call a hobo, not the cartoonish kind with a bindle and a straw hat, but a real one. He rides the rails, sleeps under bridges, and somehow knows 100 ways to turn a fire pit and a can of beans into a banquet. He's your unofficial guide to what he calls hobo cuisine. You come to a clearing near a freight yard where a few other folks have gathered. There's a fire burning low, surrounded by stones and old coffee cans. Someone's heating water. Someone else is skinning a rabbit. A third guy's slicing an onion so fast you'd think he was auditioning for a cooking show, if those had existed. You take it all in, nervous but curious. This isn't your home, but you were invited, and that's enough. Virgil pulls out a tin can with no label and shakes it next to his ear. "Corn," he says, like it's the jackpot. Then he grabs a hunk of bacon grease wrapped in wax paper from his knapsack. "Tonight, we eat like kings." He slices a few potatoes he probably found in a field, throws them in an old skillet over the fire and adds the corn and grease. The smell rises immediately, salty, starchy, sweet, and your stomach tightens in that painful, hopeful way. Here's your historical fact. Hobo camps, often called jungles, formed near rail lines and depots during the Depression. These were temporary communities of transient workers and job seekers, many of whom travelled by hopping freight trains. Hobo cuisine emerged from these spaces, simple, shareable, and cooked over open flames with whatever was available. Common meals included mulligan stew, made from pooled ingredients, and can cakes, fried mash made from flour, water, and grease. Now the quirky bit. Some hobos carried what they called a hobo cookbook in their heads. Recipes passed from one drifter to another by word of mouth. One popular recipe was coffee can roast, where meat, when they had it, was slow cooked in a metal can over coals with onions, beans, and whatever wild herbs they could scavenge. They'd use anything for utensils, railroad spikes as skewers, tin lids as spatulas, and sometimes, no joke, a toothbrush handle to stir soup. The academic debate around hobo culture often centres on its role in shaping American labour history. Some view these travelling workers as victims of economic collapse, while others see them as early examples of mobile labour, adapting to the demands of a broken system. Either way, their cooking traditions left a mark, both culturally and culinarily. They taught a generation that dinner didn't need a dining room. Back at the fire, you're handed a dented tin plate piled with the potato corn mixture. Virgil adds a sprinkle of dried herbs he keeps in a folded matchbox. Maybe oregano, maybe crushed weeds. It doesn't matter. It smells incredible. You sit on a log, the plate hot on your knees, and take a bite. It's good. Really good. Crispy potatoes, sweet corn, that rich, smoky flavour from the bacon fat. You eat fast, but try not to look greedy. Others around you are eating too, talking softly about the next train heading west, about rumoured jobs in Bakersfield, about how someone in Topeka got hired by a railroad company just by standing in the right place at the right time. After dinner, someone pulls out a harmonica. Another guy hums along. A third starts whittling a spoon from a stick just because. You sit there, full for once, watching sparks rise into the dark. The fire crackles. A tin cup of hot tea, just boiled water with some dandelion root, makes its way around the circle. You sip when it gets to you, and feel the warmth spread from your hands to your spine. Virgil tells you how he once made a whole stew from nothing but river mussels, wild onions, and a couple of carrots he swiped from a farm stand. Wasn't bad, he says, until the mussels fought back. You laugh harder than you have in weeks. Eventually you rise to leave, pocketing a slice of fried potato wrapped in newspaper. Virgil nods goodbye and tells you to walk in the rails, not on 'em. Hobo code for staying grounded, avoiding trouble. You nod back and start the long walk home, shoes crunching on gravel, jacket pulled tight against the wind. You climb into bed that night with your clothes still smelling of campfire and your belly unusually content. The blanket feels softer. The room feels warmer. You fall asleep thinking of tin cans, harmonicas, and how food cooked outside with strangers somehow tastes more real than anything from a stove. Tomorrow it'll be back to beans and bread crusts, but tonight, you dined in the jungle. The kitchen smells like boiled bones and burnt hope. You're sitting at the table watching your mother stir a pot with a wooden spoon so worn down it's more memory than utensil. She lifts the lid to check the contents, and you get a good look at the masterpiece. A watery stew with more shadows than ingredients. Potato peelings float alongside a few strands of celery, maybe a turnip top or two. It's a broth built on scraps, secrets, and sheer force of will. Your mother calls it salvage cooking. You call it wishful thinking soup. The base was made from a bone she fished out of the butcher's trash heap, gnawed clean, but still good for drawing out flavour if you boil it long enough. It's been simmering all day, coaxed to life with onion skins and garlic husks, thickened slightly with the last handful of yesterday's mashed beans. It's not pretty, it's not hearty, but it's food, sort of, and these days that's the only requirement. This is how dinner gets made now, not from recipes, but from instinct and whatever didn't get thrown away. Carrot ends, bacon fat scraped from the pan, wilted greens that used to be proud lettuce. Nothing is wasted. Everything gets one last chance to be useful. If it has a smell and isn't mouldy enough to fight back, it's going in the pot. Here's your historical fact. Salvage cooking wasn't just a Depression-era necessity, it became an entire style of cuisine. Families were taught to stretch food far beyond what was considered edible in better times. Cookbooks and pamphlets encouraged this behaviour, with names like How to Cook What You've Got and Stretching the Table. Tips included saving pickle juice to flavour soup, turning cracker crumbs into pie crusts, and frying watermelon rinds like squash. And now the strange one. Some folks went full Frankenstein. There are documented recipes for mock fish made from mashed navy beans and a splash of lemon extract. Others cooked fruit pies using boiled raisins, vinegar, and stale bread. There's even one recipe from a Kansas homemaker that used crushed buttons as pie weights, then forgot to take them out before serving. Her son cracked a tooth but finished the slice anyway. The scholarly debate? It's about the fine line between resourcefulness and desperation. Some historians praise Depression cooks as creative problem solvers, culinary magicians who did more with less than most modern chefs could dream of. Others argue that the need for this kind of ingenuity reflects a systemic failure. People shouldn't have to coax dinner out of garbage to stay alive. Both views are right. It was brilliant, and it shouldn't have been necessary. Back in your kitchen, your mum ladles the soup into chipped bowls. You can count the solids in it on one hand, but the steam smells like something closer to real food than you've had in days. She grates a bit of stale cheese over the top, just enough to make your mouth water, and sprinkles a few cracker crumbs like confetti. You all eat slowly, savouring the flavour even if it's mostly salt, fat and memory. Afterward, she scrapes every last drop from the pot into a jar. "Tomorrow's lunch," she says, already planning the next meal like a general mapping out battle lines. You help wash dishes in silence, hands stinging from cold water and harsh soap made from ashes and leftover grease. Your brother dries with a dishcloth that used to be a shirt sleeve. Then comes the baking experiment. Your mother pulls out a tin of flour, barely 2 scoops left, and mixes it with mashed turnip, a splash of lard, and a few spoonfuls of old oatmeal. "Biscuits," she says, though what she places in the oven looks more like a dare than a dough. The kitchen fills with the smell of baked starch and singed hope. When they come out, the biscuits are heavy and dry, with the density of paperweights and the taste of nothing in particular. But you eat one anyway, slathered with that last spoonful of government cheese, and tell yourself it's not bad. Later, you catch your mum tearing labels off old cans and stacking them on a shelf. "For insulation," she says when you ask. "Better than newspaper." You don't question it. By now you've learned that anything can be something else if you're desperate or clever enough. Before bed, you sketch a new recipe in your notebook, almost stew. Ingredients include potato skins, turnip water, old bean paste, and any 2 herbs you can pronounce. You write it in neat looping letters, as if someone someday might actually cook it on purpose. Maybe they will. Maybe one day your family's salvage meals will be remembered as quaint, even charming. You shake your head, not yet. You lie in bed under 3 quilts, none of which match, and feel the warmth of the soup still hanging in your belly. It wasn't filling, but it was enough to get you to sleep. And that's what counts. Tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again, peeling, boiling, scraping, stretching, turning trash into dinner and calling it a win. There's a jug in the corner of the pantry that you're not supposed to touch. It sits behind a stack of empty jars and rusted lids, wrapped in an old pillowcase like it's ashamed to be there. You've seen your father sneak glances at it on especially bad days, when the stew's more water than food and the house is too quiet even for breathing. You know what's inside even if no one says it out loud. Bathtub gin, clear, sharp and dangerous in all the ways that matter, when you're just trying to forget what's missing from your plate. It wasn't always there. A few months ago, your uncle from the city showed up with a bottle and a smirk, claiming he'd cracked the code. He used raisins, sugar, yeast, and a great deal of hope, brewing his own brand of liquid courage in a porcelain tub he kept under lock and key. "You can drink your dinner yet," he said with a wink, though you've never seen him turn down a real meal when it's offered. Your father listened, nodded, and a week later he started experimenting with his own batch, quietly, at night, while the rest of you pretended to sleep. Here's your historical fact. During the Great Depression, the end of Prohibition didn't end bootlegging, it just changed the customer base. With jobs gone and morale even lower, homebrewed alcohol like bathtub tea, gin, potato whiskey, and fruit wine became both a coping mechanism and a tradable commodity. People drank to forget, sure, but they also drank because they could barter a bottle for food, coal, or even a day's work. A good distiller was worth more than a banker in some neighbourhoods. And here's the weird twist. Despite its reputation, some of that bootleg booze was good. Certain homebrewers developed a real skill for balancing the ingredients, raisins, molasses, corn sugar, and turned their bathtubs into semi-professional distilleries. Others, not so much. One unlucky man in Ohio went blind after sipping a batch laced with wood alcohol. His nephew sold the rest of it anyway. He didn't die, he said, just couldn't see for a while. The scholarly argument here isn't just about ethics, it's about survival. Was homemade liquor a sign of decay, a symptom of moral collapse? Or was it another form of resourcefulness, like growing turnips on your porch or stretching soup with pickle juice? Some say the drinking made things worse, family tensions rising, money wasted, tempers flaring. Others argue that the occasional sip or the occasional trade of a bottle for bread made life more bearable. After all, it wasn't like there were many other comforts left. Tonight the house is colder than usual. The wind howls through the cracks in the wall, and your mother's layered on 2 extra sweaters while she cooks. The meal is nothing special, bean stew again, with a few sad carrot coins pretending to be flavour. Your dad eats in silence, then stands up and disappears into the pantry. When he returns, he doesn't say anything, just unscrews the cap from a flask and pours a clear shot into a cracked ceramic cup. You watch as he sips slowly, face pinched from the burn. His shoulders drop, not in a bad way, just in that tired way that says, "Okay, I can finish this day now." He doesn't offer any to your mum. She probably wouldn't take it anyway. She's from the coffee and teeth gritting school of survival. He's from the "I need a little something to dull the edges" school. They meet somewhere in the middle, where quiet is a truce. After dinner, your father offers you a taste, not because he thinks you want it, but because he knows you're curious. You're old enough now that these kinds of boundaries are fuzzy. You shake your head. He nods like he understands, then tucks the flask away and pulls out his harmonica instead. That's his other escape. Sometimes it's music, sometimes it's gin. Sometimes, if it's been a good day, it's both. You sit by the fire, the stew still warm in your belly, listening to him play a slow, wandering tune. It sounds like the wind outside, or maybe the whistle of a train you haven't seen in a while. Your little sister hums along, swaying like she's rocking an invisible baby. Your mum finally relaxes into her chair, folding her hands in her lap. No one talks, no one has to. Later that night, you see your dad rinse the flask out and hide it behind a row of pickled beets in the pantry. You ask him quietly why he doesn't drink it all at once. He smiles, and it's not a happy smile. It's the kind that holds something heavy behind it. "Because I still want it to work tomorrow," he says. You lie in bed wondering how many other houses are doing the same thing tonight. Sipping from hidden jugs, listening to makeshift music, trying to fall asleep before the hunger can sneak back in. You think about the flask and how something so small can carry that much weight. Maybe you'll never drink from it. Maybe you will. Either way, you understand now. It's not about getting drunk. It's about having something, a ritual, a release, a burning in the throat to prove you're still here, still feeling. Tomorrow there will be soup again, bread if you're lucky, but tonight there was gin, and silence, and a harmonica in a house that hasn't collapsed yet. You're in the backyard, and something's not right. It's too quiet. No barking, no scratching at the back door, no soft whine when your sister drops a crumb from the table. You glance toward the doghouse, empty. You call out softly at first, then louder. Nothing. Your dog, Buttons, is gone. Inside, your mother doesn't meet your eyes when you ask. Your father clears his throat and mumbles something about wandering off. But you know, the way they avoid the question says everything. Buttons didn't run away. He was taken, not by thieves or stray animal catchers, but by hunger. And not some faceless monster kind either. The human kind. The kind that lives next door. The kind that's been watching your backyard and your dog with the same expression they used to reserve for fresh loaves of bread. You don't cry, not right away. You sit at the table and poke at your plate where a new kind of stew steams gently, richer than usual, thicker, meatier. You don't ask what kind, you don't need to. You push it around with your spoon, pretending not to see the way your parents keep their heads down, chewing slowly, pretending it's just another Tuesday. You take a single bite, it's tender, salty, not bad, and somehow that makes it worse. Here's your historical fact. During the height of the Great Depression, when food was scarce and meat even scarcer, it wasn't unheard of for family pets, particularly dogs and sometimes cats, to quietly disappear. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't bragged about. But it happened, especially in the poorest neighbourhoods, where hunger blurred the lines between pet and protein. In rural areas, it wasn't uncommon for chickens and rabbits raised as companions to end up in stews once things got desperate enough. And the fringe fact? Pigeons became a surprise staple in many urban centres. Not store-bought ones, of course, but wild ones. City pigeons trapped in parks, snatched from rooftops, lured with crumbs. People even published recipes. Pigeon pie, stewed squab, roast rooftop game. A Brooklyn family was once fined for capturing over 200 pigeons in homemade traps. When asked what they planned to do with them, the father reportedly said, "Feed my boys or watch them die. You pick." The scholarly debate here touches something raw. Is it resilience or collapse when people turn to eating their pets or scavenging wildlife? Some historians argue that these were acts of survival born from extraordinary desperation, measures taken to preserve families when all else failed. Others question what kind of social safety net allows people to reach the point of having to make that choice. The truth, again, lives in the murky middle. It was survival, but survival that cost something deep and unspoken. Back at the table, your sister is humming. She doesn't know. She's too young to read the tension in your mother's shoulders, or notice the missing collar from its usual hook by the door. She eats happily, licking the spoon after each bite. "Can we have this kind again tomorrow?" she asks. "Oh." Your father doesn't answer. Your mother quietly gets up and walks into the pantry. After dinner, you slip outside into the dusk, shivering in the wind as you crouch next to the empty doghouse. The blanket is still there, rumpled and cold. You sit down beside it, not saying anything, just breathing, letting the silence wrap around you. You reach inside and pull out Button's old, chewed-up rubber ball. It's cracked and dirty, but you hold it tight. You hear something above you, wings. You look up to see a row of pigeons on the telephone line. They watch you, feathers puffed against the cold, heads tilting in that curious, twitchy way. Your stomach lurches, you shake your head. You go to bed without saying goodnight. Your dreams are strange and full of barking that echoes like thunder, followed by silence so loud it wakes you up. You lie there, blinking at the ceiling, clutching the ball like it might turn back into your dog if you just hold it tight enough. The next morning, your father's cleaning out a new trap. "For squirrels," he says too quickly. Your mother's already boiling water. You don't ask what for. You eat a slice of toast and keep your eyes on the floor. You don't touch meat for 3 weeks after that. Not because anyone told you not to, just because your body can't seem to trust it anymore. You hear whispers around the neighbourhood. Other pets that wandered off. People who started keeping chickens inside to keep them safe, only to come home and find them gone. A few kids trading pigeons like currency. One older boy brags that he can clean a squirrel with his eyes closed. No one laughs. This isn't just food anymore. It's something deeper, something darker. But you keep going. You keep eating what's served, even when it smells too good, even when it feels like a betrayal. Because the truth is, even grief needs calories. You pull open a heavy door that doesn't belong to you, stepping into a space that feels like another planet. The air is warm, the lights are low, and there's music playing, soft, slow jazz crackling through the speakers like it's been filtered through velvet. The smell hits you immediately. Roasted meat, yeast, cigarette smoke, and something sweet you can't quite place. You pause, letting it soak in, your worn shoes on tile that shines like black glass. This is a speakeasy, a secret one, and tonight, for the first time in your life, you're pretending to belong to the kind of world where people eat for fun. Your friend Hank told you about the place, said if you slipped around back of the warehouse on Sycamore Street and knocked twice, then once, then twice again, the door would open. He wasn't wrong. A woman with a red feather in her hat let you in with barely a glance, her eyes scanning your patched coat but not sending you away. She knew. Everybody here knows. You don't have money, but tonight that's not the currency. You walk toward the bar where drinks gleam in mismatched glassware and plates of food vanish behind hands wearing rings. A man in suspenders and a crooked grin hands you a cup of something fizzy and pale. You sip. It tastes like lemon and gasoline, but you don't care. You nurse it slowly while your eyes dart toward the platters on the tables. Roast pork with blackened crust, bread still warm from the oven, greens wilted in bacon grease, slices of cake layered so high they look architectural. You haven't seen food like this since before the banks closed, before your shoes shrank, before hunger became your shadow. Here's your historical fact. During Prohibition and the early years of the Great Depression, speakeasies didn't vanish, they evolved. Many turned into underground restaurants as much as drinking dens, serving hot meals under the radar to a mix of gangsters, workers, and anyone who could sneak in. While the rest of the country scraped by, these dimly lit hideouts offered warmth, music, and most dangerously of all, plenty. And the fringe fact? In cities like Chicago and New York, certain speakeasies developed reputations not for their booze, but their bread. A Harlem establishment was known to serve fresh challah at midnight, while another on the south side of Chicago became famous for its pickled eggs and mustard greens. Some chefs became low-key legends, using bootleg butter and black market beef to whip up meals that would put any hotel to shame. The scholarly conversation here is a little touchy. Were speakeasies havens of escapism for the lucky, or symbols of inequality in a nation on its knees? Some argue they were necessary sanctuaries, places where music and flavour reminded people of their humanity. Others point out the stark contrast. In one part of town, folks lined up for watery soup. In another, they dined in secret with 3 courses and jazz accompaniment. 2 Americas, same zip code. You lean on the edge of the bar, not daring to ask for a plate, until someone, an older man in a black coat with silver buttons, slides one your way. "Help yourself," he says with a grin. "We all gotta eat." You nod, stunned, and lift a small sandwich from the plate. It's corned beef on rye, with spicy mustard that bites your tongue in the best way. You take a second bite before the first is fully swallowed, eyes closing. It's the first real sandwich you've had in months. You taste everything, salt, fat, acid, bread, and feel something loosen in your chest. Later, a woman in a velvet dress offers you a slice of something so shiny it looks like dessert from a storybook. "Coconut pie," she says. "Don't ask where we got the sugar." You laugh, then eat it in 3 bites, barely tasting the last one, because your mouth's too busy remembering what sugar even feels like. You want to cry, but you don't. You just sit back in the chair and listen to the music. You don't talk much. You just observe. People laughing, couples swaying in slow dances, plates scraped clean, glasses clinking. It's not exactly glamorous. Everything is chipped, mismatched and worn, but it's the closest thing to joy you've seen in a long time. It's theatre, really. People dressing up their hunger and calling it a night out. You walk home long after midnight, your coat reeking of tobacco and onions, your belly so full you feel strange. You pass boarded-up and zip-on-up stores and alleyways that usually feel like traps, but tonight they just feel quiet. You press your hand to your stomach and smile. When you slip inside the house, your father is still up, fiddling with a broken radio. He looks up at you but doesn't ask where you've been, just nods. You reach into your pocket and hand him a crust of rye bread, half a slice you saved from the bar. He takes it gently, stares at it like it might disappear, and then breaks it in half and hands you one piece back. You eat together in silence. The next morning, you tell your mother about the coconut pie. You don't tell her where you got it, but you describe the texture, the sugar, the way it made your teeth ache in the best way. She listens with her eyes closed, smiling as if she's tasting it too. For the rest of the week, your dreams are full of speakeasies, of clinking glasses and forbidden spices, of buttered rolls and warm soup that never runs out. You know you can't go back every night. It's not that kind of place, but it exists. That's enough. Just knowing it's out there, a pocket of light in the dark, keeps you going. There's a tattered notebook on the shelf tucked between a jar of dried beans and a stack of yellowing envelopes. It smells like dust and grease and maybe a little cinnamon if you breathe in hard enough. The cover's falling off, held together with string and stubbornness. It's your grandmother's recipe book, or what's left of it. Not a polished collection, not a printed volume, just scraps of paper glued and tucked in, ink faded, margins filled with notes like, "Double the salt if you've got it," or "Skip eggs, add vinegar." Your mother pulls it down slowly, like it's sacred, flipping through the pages with her fingers held soft as a whisper. "She used to make this one," she says, pointing to a smudged recipe labelled simply potato peel pie. No crust, no sugar, but it worked. You squint at the handwriting, equal parts looping and frantic, the kind of script someone uses when they're trying to finish before the candle burns out. It's not just a cookbook, it's a map through hunger, one that your family's been tracing for years. This is how knowledge survives in a world with too little and too much at once, passed down not by lectures, but by necessity. Your grandmother didn't write a memoir. She wrote how to feed 6 on a handful of lentils. She wrote how to make applesauce without apples. She wrote how to make your children smile even when the plate looks empty. Here's your historical fact. During the Great Depression, families across the country compiled their own cookbooks, scrapbooks of survival filled with inherited recipes, neighbours' tips, and clipped newspaper instructions. These handwritten collections were rarely published or preserved by institutions, but they became the backbone of family food culture, especially in working-class homes. They were updated constantly, adapted on the fly and guarded like treasure. And the strange detail? Some of these cookbooks weren't just practical, they were defiant. Women would write sarcastic notes in the margins like, "Tastes like glue but fills you up," or "Serve to in-laws if you're feeling passive-aggressive." Others included made-up recipes with absurd names like invisible cake or air pudding, as if to mock the absurdity of cooking with nothing. A few families even wrote poems alongside their recipes, turning meals into memory and rhythm. The academic discussion around these cookbooks has grown in recent years. Some scholars treat them as vital historical texts, evidence of how women in particular preserved not just recipes, but community, identity and dignity. Others view them as emotional artifacts, windows into the resilience that doesn't show up in bank records or census data. The debate continues, but one thing is certain. These books fed more than bodies. They fed spirits. Back in your kitchen, your mother chooses a recipe labelled Poor Man's Rice Pudding. It's got exactly 4 ingredients: leftover rice, a splash of milk, a pinch of sugar, and a whisper of cinnamon. You heat the milk carefully, stir in the rice, and watch it thicken. It's not pudding like the kind you get in a diner, it's more like rice with ambitions, but the cinnamon, just a dash from the tin hidden in the back of the cabinet, transforms it. Suddenly it smells like Christmas. You spoon it into chipped bowls and eat it warm, like you're part of something older than this day. That night, your mother copies 3 of the notebook's recipes onto separate pieces of paper. One for you, one for your sister, one for the neighbour whose husband just left town looking for work. She writes each one in her best script, signs them with a heart. Pass them on, she says. If we stop sharing them, they die. You fold yours into your coat pocket like a love letter. The next day you show it to your friend across the street, and he scribbles down a variation of his own. Bread crust cobbler, topped with fried raisins and honey water. You add it to your own growing notebook, which lives under your mattress with other scribbles, sketches and stolen dreams. By the end of the week, your community has unofficially created a recipe chain. Little scraps passed from hand to hand, each one stained with grease or pencil marks or hope. One kid swears his mum makes mock lemon bars using vinegar, crackers and prayer. Another brags about carrot bacon, thin slices fried until they're crisp and salty. No one pretends it's the real thing, but that's not the point. The point is, you get to taste something different. The point is, someone shared. You lie in bed reading your grandmother's notes again. One entry reads, "Always add something sweet, even if it's just a smile." You close your eyes and you can almost hear her voice, rough and warm like wood smoke and the clatter of her old metal pot on the stove. The world outside is still broken. There's still no money in the bank. The grocery shelves are still half empty, but there's a bowl in the sink that smells like cinnamon, and a stack of new recipes by the door. You may be poor, you may be tired, but you're not without flavour, and you're definitely not without a plan. You're standing in the kitchen, once again, but this time it's not for dinner. There's no pot bubbling on the stove, no flour dust in the air, no one shuffling around muttering about substitutions and missing ingredients. The stove is cold, the counter is clean, the chairs are pushed in. For the first time in what feels like forever, there's nothing being cooked, and somehow that's louder than anything else. You lean against the doorframe and look around. The kitchen used to be a place of crisis, constant calculations of what you had versus what you needed, of hunger versus hope, of how many mouths could be fed on one turnip and a quarter bag of rice. Now it's something else. Not full, not fancy, not fixed, but calmer. Like a storm has passed, and while it didn't leave everything standing, it left enough. In the corner, your mother is putting away the last of the groceries. Real ones, not relief cans, not powdered eggs or sad-looking onions from a backyard garden. A sack of flour with a brand label. A carton of milk with an actual expiration date. Even, somehow, a stick of butter. She runs her fingers across the packaging like it's velvet. You realise then that food for her hasn't just been nourishment. It's been memory, grief, guilt, victory, all in one pot. Sure. Here's your final historical fact. After the worst years of the Great Depression, many families carried their food habits well into the decades that followed. Even when prosperity returned, the ghosts of hunger stayed. People hoarded canned goods, saved bacon grease in jars, cut mould off bread instead of throwing it away. Some never quite trusted full pantries again. The Depression ended, but its echo rang out in kitchens for generations. And the quirk, plenty of Depression foods, refused to disappear. They evolved. Peanut butter bread became a lunchbox staple. Wacky cake made its way into potlucks and PTA meetings. Recipes born of desperation turned into tradition. Grandkids with full fridges now eat things their grandparents cooked when they had almost nothing. And they like them. What started at necessity became nostalgia. The scholars go back and forth on this one. Was this long-lasting food behaviour a sign of trauma passed down like an heirloom? Or was it the ultimate proof of resilience, how a generation learned to survive and then used those same tools to shape better lives? Most agree it's both. The Depression taught people to be frugal, creative and grateful. It also left them haunted. The line between wisdom and wound isn't always clear. You open the cupboard and see a familiar jar. The old recipe notebook, now repaired with new thread and a cloth cover, sits next to it. Your mother added more pages. You recognise your own handwriting, your sister's scrawl, even a note from the neighbour who brought over her miracle muffins last winter. The book isn't just a relic anymore. It's alive. A record of everything you cooked, traded, faked or salvaged to get through the hardest years. Tonight's dinner isn't glamorous. A roast chicken, small but real. Mashed potatoes with a pat of that precious butter. Carrots, not from the alley or canned, but fresh. Your mother even makes a simple cake with a bit of cocoa powder, soft and warm and sliced in generous pieces. No vinegar, no mystery beans, just cake. You all sit at the table like it's a special occasion, though no one says so out loud. Your father raises a cup of weak tea and gives a little nod. To full plates, he says, you dig in but slow, not because you're savouring it, though you are, but because you remember when the table held less. When dinner came from a government box or a garden built on guesswork, you chew each bite and let it fill more than your stomach. It fills a kind of silence, one you didn't know was living inside you until it started to fade. After the meal, you help with dishes. No one talks about how different tonight feels, but you can see it in the way your sister hums, in the way your mother wipes the counter and doesn't sigh. There's a shift, subtle but certain. The panic has eased, even if the memories haven't. Before bed, you add a new recipe to the notebook. Simple chicken with gravy, no substitutions. You write it carefully, underlining the word simple like it's a badge of honour, because sometimes having enough is the best recipe of all. You lie down with a full belly and a calm heart. The wind outside sounds gentler somehow. The kitchen may still creak, the floor may still lean, but tonight it holds something strong. Proof that even in the deepest dark, people found ways to eat, to survive, to share and to laugh. You close your eyes knowing you'll never forget the taste of those years. The bland beans, the dusty cornbread, the soups made from scraps and the stews named after presidents. The flavour of sacrifice, the seasoning of hope, the deep quiet hunger that shaped you. And somehow you're grateful, not for the struggle, but for the survival, sec. Now the house is still. The table has been cleared. The notebook's back on the shelf, resting between a jar of flour and a chipped salt shaker. There's no more soup on the stove, no bread crusts drying on the counter, no frantic scanning of the pantry for one last onion. The kitchen clock ticks like it always has, but the air is different, less heavy. You walk through the room and run your fingers along the counter, touching the same wood your mother leaned on when she was deciding how to turn 2 potatoes and a spoonful of grease into dinner for 5. The floor creaks under your steps, but even that feels softer. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters gently, not like it used to when every gust sounded like it might blow your life apart. You sit at the table, no longer hungry, just quiet. You think about everything this kitchen has seen. Boiled bones and biscuit failures, scavenged greens and powdered milk, laughter that cracked through hunger, and recipes that passed from hand to hand like secret spells. You remember the soup lines, the rooftop chickens, the lard sandwiches. You remember that first bite of canned peaches after weeks of cornbread, and the night buttons didn't come home. You remember your dad sipping bathtub gin in the corner while your mother stirred water into stew and called it dinner. You remember everything, not with bitterness, just with weight. And love. Because in this place, in this moment, you know something for certain. You survived. And not just survived. You learned to cook, to adapt, to trade, to endure. You made food where there was almost none. You built meals out of scraps, dignity out of dust. You were hungry, but you were never empty. So now, as the last ember fades from the stove, you close your eyes and let the memory of the kitchen hold you. It's warm here, not because the oven's on, but because you're here. Full, tired, whole. Tomorrow the world will need you again, but tonight you rest.